What will be the biggest storyline, Leafs storyline, heading into the second half? AK, what's going to dominate the Homestand Leafs podcast for the rest of the season?
I believe it will be Auston Matthews' chase for 70 goals this season.
Really?
Look, currently, right now, he's played 46 games. He has 40 goals, 18 assists. That projects out to 80 games, 70 goals, 31 assists. Let's face it, Auston Matthews is not going to pass the puck. He's going to shoot first. That, to me, right now, is the biggest storyline. And I was looking, at the numbers of the 80s and stuff like that. So in 12 years from 1981 to 1982, from 81-82, to 92-93, at least one player scored 70 goals in 10 of those years. Now, it's a different game, completely different game. Goalies were smoking cigs in the intermission, had pads the size pads the size of like pillows, right? Not very big and stuff like that. Of course, you had Gretzky's 92 goals. McGillney and Solani scored 76. Since then, nobody's come close except Alex Ovechkin, who I believe in his third season had 65 goals. This is going to be very interesting because as the numbers project out and as the season goes along, the Leafs need him to score. We've talked about that ad nauseum during this whole pod. I think this is going to be something that's going to be so unprecedented. Only to score 70 goals in this day and age, it is so hard to do because of the coaching, the players, the game plans, all the attention, all of that pressure that comes with it. That, to me, is going to be a very, very big storyline for the rest of the season. And I really want to see how he can continue this hot streak going towards the All-Star break and how this pause for the All-Star break affects Matthews' rhythm. Because, look, the Leafs were playing a lot better hockey. Matthews has been on fire since 2024 started. He's been on fire for the whole year pretty much. But this break, this big pause in the middle of the season, and then to pick it up right again, is he gonna take some games off? Is his projections gonna dip a little bit? That's what I'm intrigued to see. But Albert, I think this is the biggest thing going forward: is can Matthews hit that 70 goal mark? Something that I think was never really thought of. I think, at least in my opinion, that somebody could score 70 goals. There's gonna be a lot of 50 goal scorers this year. There's tons of guys projected to score 50, but 70. Something you would never think would have happened looking at the current landscape of the NHL.
It's definitely something we're going to be talking about. Everyone's going to be talking about because it hasn't happened in so long. Like you mentioned, 31 years, Solani and McGillney doing it. But is that really going to overshadow the goaltending situation? Trade deadline? They're not locked into a playoff spot?
Stars sell the game.
I get what you're saying, but for the Toronto Maple Leafs, if the Toronto Maple Leafs are out of a playoff spot, let's say come the last month of the season, which is still unlikely, I will say that, but Auston Matthews is still pushing for 70. Do you think Leaf fans will really care about that 70 if this Toronto Maple Leafs team is not in a playoff spot?
I think so.
Come on. Playoffs? Leafs out of the playoffs?
Stars sell because if they're out of the playoffs, right? That's the one positive thing that people can push towards and lean on to,
But it
make
won't.
them
But
feel
the
good.
thing is, it won't be positive though around the team.
The only way, and we'll get to this a little bit later because I want to touch on the playoff race as well. But right now, as currently looks on the landscape of the standings, the Leafs are pretty solidified into a playoff spot, right? Whether that's going to be through one of the top 3 spots in the division or a wild card. I believe that if the Leafs fall out of the playoffs, it's going to be because of a rash of injuries or whatever, where there's already going to be built-in excuses as to why they missed the playoffs, right? That, to me, is something that's like, it's inconceivable to think about because they're going to make the playoffs. It just depends on where their seeding is going to be. If they don't make the playoffs, it's either a huge injury or it's just a colossal collapse, right? So the reason why that's number one, I just can't think of what the Leafs missing the playoffs because I don't think it's going to happen.
And listen, I'm not trying to dismiss Auston Matthews potentially scoring 70 goals. It really is incredible. There's a lot that needs to go his way. Obviously, he's got to stay healthy. The guy's only played one full season in his entire career. I think he needs 30 in the remaining 35 games. Yeah, they have 35 games left, 30 goals. Can he do it? Of course he can.
Yeah.
The guy's hit 28 in his first 30 games of the season. But I just think there's a lot more going around this Leafs team. And you're saying, barring a colossal collapse or massive injury, they should make the playoffs.
Yeah.
But let's look at the goaltending. And that's my number one storyline. Okay. Because Samsonov, this story has been amazing. And we always talk about it. This guy he completely lost it. Got sent down. The same thing that happened to Alec Manoah with the Toronto Blue Jays. He lost it. Got sent down. Manoah never came back up. Samsonov did. They gave him another shot. And now he's showing them that, listen, he can play in net once again and be a really good goalie. He's turned into like Brodeur. He looks great out there.
Yes.
But how long can that last? Can you really, if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, You're Brandon Shanahan, you're Brad Treliving, you're Sheldon Keefe. Can you truly, as of right now, heading into the break, trust Ilya Samsonov? I don't think they can. Do you truly believe in Joseph Woll when he comes back from this injury that he's been out for over a month with, this high ankle sprain, this rookie who's never played 82 games in a regular season? Do you really trust him? Can he bounce back the way that you think he can bounce back? Martin Jones, your third stringer, obviously he's done a great job up until this point to keep the Leafs in a really good position. Because without him, I don't know where the Toronto Maple Leafs would be. There probably would have been a trade or something, but without him, this season is over. I think he saved their season. But can you trust those 3 goalies? I don't think so. And I think there's still a lot of runway until the NHL trade deadline. So there's a chance that the Toronto Maple Leafs maybe make a move for a goaltender if they don't trust these guys. But if 1, 2, or possibly 3 of these guys falter, that can be the end of the Toronto Maple Leafs season. So I think it's something that Leafs fans want to see what goes on with the goaltending, and Treliving has to be looking around for a goalie just in case.
But I think they have 3 goalies right now, right? And you talk about the trust factor and all of that. We talked about it last pod. They're probably going to keep all 3 goalies on the active roster moving forward, right? Somebody will go down. And so the way I see the Leafs goaltending situation is kind of how you mentioned baseball at the top. I see them kind of running it like, you have your pitching staff. You have 5 starting pitchers. In this case, you're going to have 3 starting goalies, right?
But you're running 3 goalies for the rest of the way?
You might have to, right?
That's scary times.
So you run 2, right? You run 2, and then if one guy falters, the other guy steps in and takes that spot, right? They're going to run it like that. If it's going to be, they talk about a platoon, it's going to be a trifecta. That's like crazy. That. Look at the current stats for the goalies this year. Samsonov leads it with 19 games played. Woll and Jones have played 17 and 15 respectively. No goalie for the Toronto Maple Leafs has a double-digit wins this season.
Well, that's not what they wanted, though,
That's
right?
not what they wanted.
Gets injured, Samsonov loses it. Martin Jones wasn't even expected probably to play 5 to 10 games.
I get it. But he's played 17 games, and he's played pretty good for a majority of those, right? So this is what I'm saying. You run 3 goalies. You have now a buffer where if one guy kind of falls off, another guy has played starting minutes for you for an extended, but a significant period of time in a regular season. He can elevate it into the backup role or the starter role. You have options now. They don't have the assets to go acquire a goalie, whether that's Jake Allen, whoever, right?
Well, they do. It's if they're willing to part ways
but then
with
there's also the
first rounder, a goalie, and potentially a prospect.
Exactly. You need a first rounder.
So it's there. That's what I'm saying.
We talk about the defense issues as well, right? So there's so many issues on this team where does it make sense to deplete those to get a goalie to come in when you already have 3 that have kind of played a whole bunch?
Hey man, you don't have a lot of time left. It may seem like you have a lot of time left, but you don't. You're gonna burn another year. We've already
Matthews,
Marner.
But we've already talked about
Vertanian.
They're not winning this year. It's already burned this year. They're not going to win anything this year.
No, but you have to buy a ticket for your chance to win the raffle. I know you love quotes, so you're going to like that.
Yeah,
one.
no,
you got to get to the playoffs because if you look at the East and you look at the West, who is a clear-cut runaway? Vancouver looks fantastic. We haven't seen them in the playoffs. We don't know what they're going to be. Mm-hmm. As good as Colorado look, their goaltending is shaky. You look in the East. Okay, Boston's a pretty solid team. Look at the New York Rangers. They're faltering at the moment. Shesterkin doesn't look great. I think it's actually wide open, in my opinion. There's a couple teams at the top. The LA Kings are struggling, but the Leafs, they need to get in. And I think that they will, but this is a massive issue because you have 3 goalies you don't have 100% trust in. That's a scary place to be if you want to be a cup contender.
You bring a goalie in. Say for example, you swing big and you bring in Elvis Merzlikins from Columbus, right? Do you trust him 100%?
No, I'm not saying that will save that, but I'm just saying I don't think the Leafs actively want to go and get a goalie. I think they'd rather get a defenseman and some secondary scoring. I truly believe that.
There you go.
But from now until that trade deadline, if this goaltending trio isn't working out, then you're going to have to make a decision. You might have to pay for a goaltender just to get you into the playoffs, Justin Pooni. This is what I'm saying. That's why I believe it trumps Auston Matthews. The individual record of hitting 70 goals and the individual accolades are fantastic, but if that brings no success to the team, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so
that's how Leaf fans are going to look at that.
I'm not poo-pooing on the goalie thing at all, but I just see that you have the 3 goalies that have, basically equally carried the mail for the entire season. I just see that continuing on, right? Now does Woll come back in and play well and elevate a little bit more? But I totally see a scenario where down the stretch, all 3 goalies are going to start extended games,
crazy.
Right?
I know.
But look, that's just the situation that it is. They're in no position out there to go, and there's so many other holes on this team where it's going to get exposed quickly in a playoff series. Look, it might not surprise me at all if they pan out and play a Florida or a Rangers and in a first round series, hell, even a Boston where they could get swept or gentlemen swept in 5.
Florida.
We saw that last year with Florida in the second round.
Man, are the toughest, baddest team in the NHL. So, you want to stay away from Florida.
And then, but that leads into my second point, where the playoff positioning race is going to be the second biggest topic of discussion for the Leafs in this playoff series. Where I believe that last year we knew by December or pretty much around then that the Leafs were going to play Tampa Bay.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
We knew by that point the Leafs-Tampa had set. It just depended on who's going to get home ice advantage. And then for the last 6-7 weeks of the season, we knew Toronto was going to have home ice. Game 1 was going to be in Toronto. This year, as currently looking at the standings at the break, the Leafs are in the first wild card spot, so they would play against the New York Rangers. They're 1 point behind the Tampa Bay Lightning, but they have 3 games in hand. Right? So looking at the playoff percentages right now, the Leafs have a 90% chance to make the playoffs, right? Which is cool, right? That's what kind of led to my first point. I'm not really too worried about them missing the playoffs. But this, to me, is the interesting stuff. So they have a 3.8% chance to win the Atlantic. Not going to happen, right? But then look at the disparity of this. 14% chance of coming second. 33% chance of coming third. And then 27% chance of coming in the first wild card, 11.5% chance of coming in the second wild card. So chances are, as currently looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second half of the season, they don't know who they're going to play, right? It could be Florida, it could be New York, whoever wins the Metro Division, right? They're not going to get home ice advantage, right, at this particular juncture. Now, could they go on a heater and somehow get second place in the Atlantic? Maybe. But this is going to be something very interesting for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that has had home ice advantage for the last couple of years in the playoffs, but just hasn't done anything.
What good has it done them outside of the last playoffs?
Outside the last playoff. But then this situation is going to be even worse because now they're going to start off on the road in the playoffs, most likely, right?
Yeah.
We talk about the goalie situation and who do you trust and stuff like that. In the playoffs, you need a goalie, especially when you don't have home ice advantage, to steal a game on the road. Are we at this particular point looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs thinking Martin Jones, Samsonov, or Joseph Woll can go into an MSG, that environment in the playoffs, a Philadelphia with that environment?
The Flyers made a run to the final with 3 goalies. So maybe you're onto something, Pooni. I don't know.
They did, but I just don't see it as currently constructed. So to me, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Leafs play out the rest of the season, who they match up against, because that's going to be very interesting. Do they go up against the Florida again, which, as the percentages say, is the most likely? Or do they take a step down and face whoever comes first in the Metro, which I don't think is a bad situation because New York hasn't been the best playoff team. Philly has had a very good year, but we don't really trust Philly. And who knows, after Carter Hart is now going through his whole situation, what the hell's going to go on with the Flyers, right? So I'm very interested into seeing what's going to happen with the Leafs and who they match up with in the playoffs.
Yeah, listen, at this point, it doesn't matter. Just get in. I think that's the position that the Toronto Maple Leafs are in. And just one more thing on the goaltending. I keep saying, like, can you trust these goalies? Can you trust these goalies? But another reason is why they do need good goaltending. They're top 7 in high danger chances against. That's horrible when you're the Toronto Maple Leafs and you're a cup contender. Other cup teams aren't in that position. Top 4 in defensive zone giveaways to opponent. That means that they're putting their goaltenders under unnecessary pressure and making them make big saves night in and night out. So you need a really good goaltender. You don't need a Martin Jones. You don't need a Samsonov who you don't know what night he's going to be good, or Joseph Woll, which you still don't know what you have. You need a steady Eddie back there, and it's difficult to find those guys. But for the Toronto Maple Leafs, heading into this second part of the season, that's where they really need to analyze. Okay, if we can't strengthen our defense, we have to do something at the goaltending situation, because if we don't have one of the best goalies available and a guy that's going to stand on his head like 5 out of 10 times, then there's no chance we're going to win anything, potentially even miss the playoffs. Okay, there's one more storyline that I think could dominate the second half of the season, and I keep talking about it every single show, and I keep mentioning it. It's the secondary scoring. It's a real problem, and I'm going to tell you why. Goals from outside the 4, I'm not calling them the core 4, outside the 4 are an issue. If you look at the core 4, which I just called them, I said I wasn't going to call them that, which is Tavares, Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, they've accounted for 96 goals of the 166 that the Toronto Maple Leafs have scored. That's 58%. Now, I was looking at some of the other teams, some of the highest scoring teams in the NHL. Colorado, your Vancouver Canucks, Justin Pooni, and the Dallas Stars. The top 4 account for less than 50% of goals to those teams. This is what I'm saying, why secondary scoring and the lack of it might dominate the headlines, because if Matthews dries up for whatever reason or gets injured, if Nylander dries up, which he has so far, Tavares isn't really scoring goals. Max Domi is on pace to score 7 goals. Like, this is a real problem with the Toronto Maple Leafs that they need to address immediately. They need to figure out their goaltending, at least hope that the goaltending that they have is good enough, which what we touched on. They still need another stud defenseman, an upgrade on TJ Brody. Definitely need an upgrade on TJ Brody. But add to that mix, you need some extra scoring in your bottom 6, and they don't have that. You need a balance throughout the lineup. And this isn't new to this season. This has been going on since they signed Auston Matthews, Martin, and Tavares to those contracts, and now Nylander, where you don't have enough money to fill out the rest of your bottom 6 with goal scorers. I mean, luckily they found Nick Robertson, or like they keep playing Nick Robertson, who looks like he's trending in that direction. He's on pace for 20 goals, 20 assists, which would put him, I think, 4th or 5th in terms of Toronto Maple Leafs when it comes to goal scoring. It's a real issue, man. I mean, you look at Colorado, they got studs, but the rest of their lineup is scoring goals. Vancouver, we talk about them all season, how good they are, but they're so well balanced, from top to bottom. And the Leafs, they're not in the same position. And I think that's something Treliving might need to address at the trade deadline. It's super important right now.
Absolutely. So let's look at the Canucks and compare the Canucks and the Leafs right now. It's 2 teams. So look at the cap friendly of the Vancouver Canucks, right? They have 12 forwards under contract right now for $44.6 million, right? Look at the Toronto Maple Leafs current cap construction of their forwards. 13 forwards for $58 million, okay? So we know Auston Matthews, John Tavares, Mitch Marner put up all those points. You can put Besser, Pedersen, Miller in that. But it's what is after that. Connor Garland has 24 points, 8 goals, and 16 assists. Dakota Joshua has 12 goals this season. You know how much he's making, Albert? $825,000.
Contributors, man.
Ilya Mikheyev has 10 goals this season. Andrei Kuzmenko is going to get traded. Everybody wants to trade. He has 8 goals on this year. This is the guy who scored 40 goals last year.
Who Rick Tocchet hates.
Rick Tocchet hates. Sam Lafferty has 10 goals. Niels Höglander has 14 goals.
Höglander.
Pius Suter has 12 goals.
Yeah,
right.
So this is what I'm saying.
This is exactly it. Because the Leafs have so much money on those big guys up front, right? What did I say? It was $58 million or whatever. They can't afford to find these guys for, even a guy like Connor Garland who's being severely overpaid, but they can't find these mid-level guys, this middle-class row of guys. Hold on. That can have time to grow in the system, right? You bring in a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi, you bring in a guy like Max Domi, right? Who are supposed to be secondary scoring. And I've been ripping on them all season, but there's never been any consistency that they can build because the lines are constantly changing.
They have been. More or less, it's been the same lines.
Okay, but there's still changes here and there, right? When you look at a team like the Canucks, again, their lines, they had the Lauder line for a couple weeks, but for majority it's been Pedersen, Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, Miller, Besser, and whomever, and then the third line of Joshua, Garland, and who else is on the Suter? Pius Suter, whoever it is, right? Like, you need to have consistency through the lineup. And when I'm looking at the Leafs right now, because they have, it's LeBron James said it when he was with the Cavs. We're top heavy as shit. The Leafs have been top heavy as shit for years, and that's the problem you're gonna get. Because you're taking so much of your financial resources and putting it towards a small group of people. You can't afford to pay anybody else, and then you're hoping and praying that a guy like Nick Robertson can play well for an entire season. But we've only seen him play well for what, a week and a half, 2 weeks, right? You're hoping that you take a flyer on a guy like Max Domi or a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi on a 1-year deal where, teams like Boston didn't want to re-sign him. Max Domi's bounced around the whole league, pretty much the entire league throughout his career. So you're hoping that those guys somehow catch lightning in a bottle in a season. And sometimes, Albert, that's more times than not, it's just not going to work out, right?
I don't know if they're looking for lightning in a bottle. They're just looking for better production. Like, there's a great tweet here from Kevin Papetti of The Athletic, and he posted a tweet about each player's current pace per 82 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You look at Max Domi, he's on pace for 7 goals and 35 assists.
Horrible.
Not great. Tyler Bertuzzi, 11 goals, 25 assists. And I get they don't have that type of money to spread around. They gave Bertuzzi 5.5. They gave Max Domi $3 million. Mm-hmm. They're underperforming. This has nothing to do with the cap. This has everything to do with these players aren't scoring goals and doing the things that they're supposed to do. That is the issue. If those two guys were contributing the way that they're supposed to do and on pace for 20 or 20 plus goals, then we're probably not having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're just looking at defense and the goaltending. But two guys faltering as much as they are, make it 3. You could throw John Tavares in there. It pulls down the rest of the team. And listen, we talk about it all the time, dude. If Auston Matthews isn't scoring the way that he's scoring, this team is done. There's nothing else that you can possibly do. You think Nylander or Marner are going to carry the load? No chance. They haven't been doing that.
And look, we talk about as well, like their defense. They don't get points from their defense whatsoever. Again, you look at the Canucks. Quinn Hughes. Again, Quinn Hughes is in a different stratosphere than everybody on the Leafs defense score.
He's probably favored for the Norris.
Filip Hronek has 36 points, right? You got a guy, even guys like Carson Soucy, right? He's chipped in offensively. You know, you got Zadorov. Those guys are not going to put points up, but there's guys on the defense court. Tyler Myers has 18 points this year, right? That's impressive. You need, and you look at the teams across, all the good teams, the Carolinas, the Colorados, the the Rangers, the Golden Knights. It's a lot of it's by committee, right? You need to have more than a small group of 4 to 5 guys. Yeah, they have to be the leaders, but you need everybody to be going and producing. The Leafs haven't had that for a very long time, and I think now we're starting to see this season, it's really catching up to them, where they're not getting the consistent scoring across the board, and you're seeing just how much trouble it gets them in. That is why we hear things in the offseason that maybe it's time that a guy like Mitch Marner or somebody gets moved off, and you can't run it back with this thing because it's a team. You can't. A core 4 is not going to win you a Stanley Cup. A team as a whole in the Toronto Maple Leafs will win you a Stanley Cup. Will a core 4 be the catalyst and the drivers of it? They absolutely should be, but you need your secondary pieces, your 8 to 12 forwards, your 4 to 6 defensemen chipping in as well. Not all the time, but there needs to be consistent production from them, and the Leafs don't have that. And that right there, like you mentioned, is probably their biggest issue as to why they're not going to do nothing.
So they're going to have to address that secondary scoring, but what do you give up? I'm looking at certain players who are potentially on the block. You look at Montreal, Sean Monahan, who's having a pretty good season.
He's had a career renaissance,
he's probably going to have like 65, 70 points by the end of the season, but the reports are that they want a first-round pick for him. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, hey, what could the Leafs do for a guy like Sean Monahan? And I know he's not a world beater, but he can score. And that's what he's been doing. He's skating better than he ever has, and I think a long time in his career. Would you do, this is so hypothetical, Justin Pooni, but Max Domi for Monahan? Monahan makes less than $2 million, and he's a pending UFA. Domi makes 3 and is a pending UFA. But he's not performing the way that he should.
I don't see Montreal doing that because
they're probably not going to do that. But would you throw in Domi? Yeah, it's not worth it.
Because
it's not worth it.
So
it's not worth it.
The secondary
But what I'm saying is there are players out there that are cheaper who are outperforming some of the guys like Domi and Bertuzzi.
One thing could be said is though Sean Monahan gets to play up on the lineup a lot more on the Montreal Canadiens because they're not that good, right? So he's in a lot more positions to be successeful and to put the puck in.
Put him on the third line.
Full credit to Sean Monahan. He's had a great career renaissance since things flamed out in Calgary. But
Duclair's out there.
Duclair as well. But for those guys, right, you need to keep a Domi and Bertuzzi because you want to add to the secondary scoring. A 1-to-1 swap is kind of just going around in a circle, I think. So.
And this thing about, flipping Nick Robertson, I really hope they don't do that. I don't know if he's going to be consistently playing the way that he is. Is he going to finish with 20 goals? I hope so. A guy making less than $1 million, finishing 20 goals and 20 assists for 40 points, that's a great season. The Leafs need those guys like that.
They do.
I don't understand packaging him in the deal, considering he's a pending UFA. His qualifying offer, Justin Pooni, is just over $800,000. In what world, if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are expected and probably will give Mitch Marner $12.5+ million per year, can you get rid of a player that's cost control that way? Do not do it. I'm telling you, Toronto Maple Leafs, Brandon Shanahan, the Shannon plan, Treliving, do not move on from Robertson. Keep him as long as you can. And if he's playing the way that he is, long may he continue. Give the guy a run on the top line and see what you can do. But based on your cap situation, you cannot get rid of guys like this. As I just said, trade Max Domi for Sean Monahan.
It's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Leafs are in trouble. Okay, let's take a quick break, and let's finish up with our top 5 Toronto Maple Leaf players heading into the break. We're very similar. I saw your ranking, Justin Pooni. But we have one player that differentiates the two. Nice.